Welcome back to Will the People, and as promised, we're joined by Derek Maltz, who had a almost 3-decade-long distinguished career with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Derek, welcome to Will the People.
How you doing, Bill? Thanks for having me.
No, it's our honor, Derek, and listen, down here in the Grand Strand area, I've been wanting to get you on for a while. I've been watching you do interviews for years, especially on Fox News, and caught one of your recent interviews, and also know you've done Dr. Phil, and you've been a big proponent of what is really going on in today's world and trying to wake people up to the real danger of fentanyl, the real danger of what's going on between the Mexicans and the Chinese, and how they've infiltrated the United States, not just at the border, but on a state-by-state basis. And, I've got a couple questions to ask you that will lead into that. So at your time at the DEA, what were some of the biggest threats that you saw? Because you've worked on some high-profile situations, and how do they compare to what you're seeing present time?
Bill, great question. So fortunately, I was in charge of DEA Special Operations Division about 10 years. When I got there were 9 agencies, and it grew to 30 agencies, 3 countries, and the NYPD. So it was in the middle of operations of a lot of agencies, so I got to see significant things. Of course, the Mexican cartels have been the greatest drug threat to America for many years. So we were focused on the cartels. And, of course, the DEA started getting involved with a lot of crime and terror cases because around the world the terrorists are tapping into the proceeds of criminal activity like drug trafficking to support their radical operations. So we did get involved with many other cases around the world. But by far, the Mexican cartel alliance with the Chinese criminal networks is the greatest threat to this country because we are sustaining a ongoing chemical poisoning attack on our citizens. This is not an embellishment. I lived it when I was there in 2008, started to see the initial phases of the synthetic cannabinoids, synthetic capanones, K2 spice, and bath salts. Then it became fentanyl. Then it became the chemicals at record levels to make fentanyl for the cartels to operate on their own. But right now it's the xylazine, it's the nitazine, the isonitazine, all these other more, potent synthetic opioids killing our kids, and it's all under the radar. But, Bill, as you know, because you follow this closely, the cartels are using the Chinese criminals for their money laundering services, which is something that we've never really seen in the history of this country over the last 6 years.
Well, one thing I want to bring to the listeners' attention here, Derek, is that America, in my opinion, we have lost the war on drugs as overdose-related deaths have quadrupled in the past decade, folks. And overdoses from fentanyl are now the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45. And what's even more disturbing is that there was a 109% increase in childhood deaths between the ages of 10 to 19 from 2019 to 2021. And about 107,000 Americans died from drug usage just in 2021 alone. That's more deaths than the number of service members killed in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. And about 80,000 of those deaths, or 75%, were due to opioids like fentanyl. So this is an internal enemy within our border that no one is discussing, and there is no outrage except for people like you, Derek. And the thing is, your retirement has really been focused on what is going on with fentanyl. Walk us through the maze as we hear about it. But if it doesn't end up on our doorstep, and if we don't have a family member or a neighbor, we don't really appreciate how deadly and dangerous and destructive this is.
Right. So it's part of an ongoing campaign because the Chinese Communist Party have their unrestricted warfare. They want to destabilize their adversaries, and right now they're doing it on the Americans' addiction to drugs. Now, I want to clarify one thing. I've been a DEA agent 28 years. My father was in the DEA for 30 years. There really has never been a war on drugs because if you're in war, you're going to use the top sophisticated technologies that we have, and you're going to decimate the enemy like we did with ISIS and like we've done with other terror groups. So right now, off the top of my head, I want you to know that The production is off the charts in Mexico of poisonous fentanyl, not only the pills, but the fentanyl powder that's now being mixed with cocaine. It's being mixed in methamphetamine. We've even had deaths of kids with marijuana usage with some fentanyl. Now, today as we speak, in the state of Virginia, in my home state, there's a police agency investigating because several kids got sick. They field tested the gummy bears positive for fentanyl. I don't want to jump to conclusions and cause hysterics, but it's probably contamination on the bag because it's probably associated with other drug trafficking in the house. But the reality is it's been reported on national news that the gummy bears had fentanyl. But the bottom line is it's an evolution of Chinese chemical warfare against our society. We're losing about 9,000 Americans every month. Plus, it's probably more than that, but our CDC is so dysfunctional and they're not reporting these deaths timely and accurately, so it's hard for us to assess the problem. We don't even have the amount of fentanyl poisonings that are happening around the country. I track that personally on my own through basic Google searches, but just as an idea, on Thanksgiving Day, in one house out in Michigan, there were 10 people poisoned. Thanksgiving week, there were 4 dead on the streets of Denver. There was also a house in early November, 7 poisoned in Oklahoma residents. So we don't even know because Narcan is saving so many lives every day. Yeah. It reverses the overdose, of fentanyl or opioids. And so anyway, we don't even keep track of that stuff. But remember during COVID, Bill, every single night on the TV, COVID cases, COVID deaths, the CDC is not doing their job. And the Department of Education is not educating the kids. Most of the families that I deal with around the country, and I deal with thousands of families, I support them every single day. They didn't even know what fentanyl was. And so it's a complete failure on part of the government not educating our communities. There's no PSA. There's no social media outreach.
I was just about to say.
It's disgusting.
Public service announcements. Because the thing is, what you brought up, Derek, around the Thanksgiving holidays, a kid could show up at home and show up with something that was given to him by a fellow student and literally kill an entire family in the form of a candy.
A good example. So you're in North Carolina. So
South Carolina.
I thought it was North Carolina.
Yeah, no,
sorry.
We're down south. We're just a little bit, but we're down south.
Okay, just let me just tell you this only because it's right in your region. There was a beautiful young freshman, like 17 or 18 years old, that was in University of North Carolina Business School. She went over to Duke to see her boyfriend. She died of fentanyl poisoning. There was another kid who died during the week. And guess what? The University North Carolina and Duke did not report this to the public. They didn't want to taint the university's image. Some reporter on campus had to do the investigative report. We didn't hear about this for like 7 or 8, 9 months later. So this is another problem we have. People don't want to talk about these poisonings because of the drug stigma. But this isn't your typical drug overdose. This is happening to kids all over the country. And by the way, a lot of these kids, like this little 1-year-old up in New York daycare center, his mother dropped him off at the daycare center, 1-year-old, so she can go to work and pay her bills. And the kid died because the savages from the Mexican Cartels, they left fentanyl on the mat that killed the kid and injured a couple other kids. That kid didn't have a substance use disorder. That kid was murdered because these cartels don't care. And the Chinese are sitting back as they destroy our military, destroy our families, our communities. And by the way, Bill, let me make this clear to all the listeners, and that is we have historic amounts of Chinese nationals coming into the country illegally. It went from 342 2 years ago. Last year there were 24,000. And this year we're already, seeing record amounts of them coming across. But here's why it's important. They're establishing marijuana grow operations all over
We're going
to
get to that. We're going to get to that in the next segment, Derek. Trust me, I want to bring that up. But here's the one thing. We've got a couple minutes left. I don't ever remember a 12-year-old kid dying in a bedroom from cocaine, methamphetamines, smoking a joint, okay? Unheard of. But now you sprinkle fentanyl on a marijuana joint or put it into cocaine, and they're dead. So why are they targeting all ages, and what the hell is wrong with schools? What is wrong with parents? And what is wrong with people in general? Because I equate this as giving everyone who is untrained a fully loaded revolver and say, hey, go out and use it at your will.
Right. So that's a great question. So the Mexican cartels are interested in one thing only, and that's to maximize their revenue. See, now that we have a wide open border, they run the largest ever human trafficking, sex trafficking operation. So they're making their revenue streams are blowing up. It's booming. And now with the drugs, they have absolutely impunity at the border. So they're just blitzing the country with all these deadly drugs. So now the thing is they're gaining a lot more customers because fentanyl is very cheap to make. And it's also extremely addictive, more so than any other drug. So they know that these customers are going to want more and more and more. And when they sprinkle it into these other drugs, it creates more revenue for them. So like the typical cocaine user may use cocaine, once or twice a week on a weekend before they go out.
Yep.
Now they're using it every day because they're addicted to it. They think it's some powerful cocaine, but then they're dying. Look at the ladies up in the Cheesecake Factory in New Jersey. 5 ladies went out
Derek,
on a lunch break.
Hold that thought right there. We got to take a quick break, all right? We'll come back on the other side and talk about that situation, Cheesecake Factory. Folks, you're listening to Derek Maltz and Will of the People. We'll be right back after these messages. Back, folks. We're continuing to be joined by Derek Maltz, former DEA Special Operations Head. And Derek, you in the last segment we were ending with what happened with the ladies up at the Cheesecake Factory. I think was it New York or New Jersey?
No, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
There were 5 ladies that went out on a break for lunch, and they were snorting cocaine in the parking lot. All 5 went down. They were poisoned by fentanyl that was mixed into cocaine, and the EMS showed up, and 4 were revived. 1 died. And now the one that died left her daughter behind. So there's a lot of stories like that. Like last March, you had the 5 West Point cadets that went down to South Beach, Florida. They snorted some cocaine. They went down. They were poisoned from fentanyl. So a lot of people don't even know. We've had professional athletes. As you know, Ray Lewis's son. We've had Robert De Niro's grandson. We have actors and Olympic athletes all dying because a lot of them are dying from what they think is snorting cocaine, and it's fentanyl into cocaine. Then we have college kids like at Ohio State University last year during finals week. They took what they thought was Adderall pills, and 2 of them died. One was a pre-med student. So this is the problem. It's getting mixed. It's not just, in the pills, the fake pills. Like DEA, just to give you an example, DEA seized already this year 74 million pills and 11,000 pounds in America with their local law enforcement counterparts. Now, why is that important? Because the DEA administrator said that lab analysis reveals that 7 out of 10 pills have a potential lethal dose of fentanyl because it only takes 2 milligrams to kill. That's like if you take a sugar packet with 1 gram, put it in your hand. I did this on the Dr. Phil show. You take 1 gram, that could potentially kill 500 people. So it is a chemical weapon attack. It's a weapon of mass destruction. But unfortunately, no one's looking at it like this because our White House is providing old talking points. This is not grandpa's opioid crisis.
No.
Yes, opioid addiction is very bad in America, but that's not what we're talking about.
So the Drug Enforcement Agency has said numerous times that the majority of fentanyl in America is produced in China and then shipped to Mexico, where they smuggle it into the United States. And also India is also producing fentanyl and being...
Well, no.
No?
Bill,
okay.
Let me correct you.
Please, because this is I've heard them say this, so this is why I'm bringing this up, Derek, so go for it.
Okay, so because it's evolving, that's why I want you to know. Yeah, in the beginning, it was China deliberately sending pure fentanyl analogs to America on the websites, okay? And people were dying all over. Then over time, they started shifting and sending all the chemicals to make fentanyl to the cartels. The majority of the fentanyl that we're seizing in America today is all being made in Mexico by the cartels, okay? So it's shifted a little bit. But now the Chinese are producing other substances like xylazine, the horse tranquilizer that's rotting people from inside and out. That's coming out of the Chinese websites into America. There's cases all over the country. So, yeah, things are rapidly changing. And one thing about the DEA I want you to be clear on is that DEA is embraced the families around America in all the different regions, have worked with the families to try to provide the education, has supported them at rallies and other things. So DEA is doing like everything they can, and the state and locals in America are doing phenomenal. You know, in South Carolina, not too long ago, last year, they hit a historic fentanyl processing location. It was African-American drug dealers in South Carolina. They seized like 6 or 7, pill presses. They buy the powder from Mexico. When they get it into the U.S., they make their own pills because it was such a profitable business. But it was astounding to see a record-level multi-agency seizure in South Carolina, last year. Because I always talk about that one because it was something like people think it's only being made in Mexico. No, it's being made in Mexico in bulk, yes, but in America, people are taking advantage of the profit they can make on their own, and they're making pills in their basements. So this is another whole problem. And the social media sites have basically enhanced the ability for the Mexican cartels and the Chinese to kill our kids because the kids are on their internet, every day. They're on their phones all day long. They're all addicted. They're sitting in their rooms. Mom and dad think they're doing homework, and they're ordering up pills, and the pills are being delivered to their house, and they're dying in their bedrooms, and the parents find them blue, and they have no idea what happened to their kids. This is really serious stuff, and it's happening all over America.
Well, let's talk for a second about the Chinese criminals that have now found their way into the United States, and like you said, the PLA aged Chinese folks that have managed to move across the border with no problem and set up shop in states like Maine in a small town and be running, a sophisticated drug-producing manufacturing facility under the nose of everybody. How is this happening, Derek?
Yeah, so, Bill, basically, any criminal out there is going to take advantage of weaknesses and vulnerabilities. So right now in America, we have this very warped sense that, marijuana is safe. Let's legalize marijuana. Why are we picking on marijuana users and all of that stuff? There's a movement. Like many states have legalized marijuana.
Which they should have never have done, right? It's
right.
A gateway. It is a gateway drug. Everybody who has ever seen anybody on it realizes that, and they know that it leads to things that you can't even comprehend until all of a sudden you're stuck in the maze with the person that's doing that, and it leads to Xanax, it leads to other things.
Right. Perfectly said. It's leading to depression and anxiety. I've spoken to doctors about this, and it creates such a euphoric high. The new marijuana today has high THC. So when the kids are smoking this new marijuana, this isn't the marijuana from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, right? This is very high, potent THC marijuana. So the kids get a big high, and then when they're not smoking it, they get depressed, they get anxiety. So they take pills, they take other drugs. So yes, you're right, it's a gateway. But more importantly, what's happening is the Chinese strategic planning, in my opinion. They recognize we need to get into America and establish these businesses all over the country. We can undercut the legalized marijuana production. We'll make our own marijuana. We'll use the cash that we're picking up from the cartels all over America because they bring the Chinese students in from China on visas, and they pick up the cash on the weekends, during the week, and they deliver it to Chinese businessmen. They invest in properties, in businesses, in land, in farms all over our country, and then they set up counterintelligence operations, and God only knows what else. But the big thing is in the state of Maine, there was a DHS memo that was leaked. There were 270 marijuana grow operations in Maine run by Chinese nationals, and it's not just Maine. It's all over the country, Oklahoma, Massachusetts, California, Oregon. It's all over because they're taking advantage of the drug addiction in America, all drug addictions, and they're able to operate, and our government's not connecting the dots. It's insanity.
Well, you make it sound like somebody who wants to open up a Play-A-Bowl or a Smoothie King. It sounds that easy the way that you describe it, Derek, that they've waltzed in, they've set up shop, they're extremely organized, they're running this as a business, and I'm saying that as a businessman. They are running this way, and you're aware of it, and other people are aware of it. Our government's aware of it. Why isn't anyone at the federal level coming down with a hammer on this?
Well, because it's very political. So the current administration doesn't want to talk about the wide open border. As a matter of fact, our Homeland Security Secretary tells the public that he has operational control of the border, which is a total lie. The White House doesn't want to talk about China because then it raises questions about Hunter Biden's business deals with the Chinese Communist Party. So there's a lot of politics. They're hiding this from the public, which is not right. That's why I'm part of border911.com with the former Homeland Security people who set up the most secure border in America, Tom Holman, Mark Morgan, Rodney Scott, working with Sarah Carter, Jason Jones, and Victor Avila to spread facts around America about really what's happening, because the public is not getting the straight scoop. Unfortunately, this is being hidden. And we have the facts. We work with law enforcement every day. They call us to tell us what's going on because they're frustrated internally that they can't tell America the truth. They basically are censored. They can't go out and speak to the media. That's the way it is. So we have a bunch of us that are doing it because we want the public to be actually educated on this. And thank you, by the way, for recognizing what we've been doing and trying to get the message out on your radio show. I appreciate that.
Well, the reason, Derek, is that we're in the middle of the Christmas holidays and Hanukkah, and people are going out, and kids, people don't even know who their kids are hanging out with. Like you said, they're locked in their phone. They think that they're taking care of them. They're taking care of themselves. I want people to realize this, especially now, that they have to be aware. These things are real. This is a threat that is absolutely not on our doorstep. It has spread like cancer throughout the United States, and we've got about 30 seconds left. I'm going to ask one question of you. That group that you mentioned, if Trump wins, would all of you step back into the DEA and clean this place up once and for all and get it back on the right track?
That's a great question, and that's obviously up to whoever the president is. I can tell you that the people I'm working with on Border 911 are all dedicated American patriots that are giving back to try to help educate the public. And I'm sure, like Tom Holman says, he's the CEO. If Trump came back, he's coming back to fix this shit, and he's going to run the largest ever deportation operation, sending people back home. Because right now we're being invaded from 180 countries, and they're everywhere, and we're all paying financially for them. And God forbid, hopefully there's not going to be some massive terrorist act in our country, because they're here. We have 1.8 million gotaways.
Yep.
We have no idea who these people are.
Well, hold it right there. We're going to bring you back for a last segment. Folks, Derek Maltz will join us as we close out the show. Stay with us after this short commercial break. Back to this final segment as we close out this week's edition of Will the People, and Derek Maltz continues to join us. And Derek, before we spend a little bit more time on Border 911's mission and what you're doing across the country, I wanted to ask you this question because it really bothers me as a veteran and somebody who's recently joined the South Carolina State Guard, again as an officer, to continue to serve in cases of emergency. And I see the president, he threatened Russia if they use chemical weapons in Ukraine, right? You've got China that is using chemical weapons against our kids. Should we be sending military to the border to put an end to this right now, or should we, go in and eradicate and take out the cartels?
Okay, great question. So the answer is yes, we need to be very aggressive, and I've been pushing out many, many months, and I've used that same analogy with Russia and the president's threat to warn, them. So that's great that you pick up on that. The second thing is that I would be decimating the cartels, but I would go to Mexico at the highest levels, and I would basically offer all the capabilities of the U.S. government to help them decimate and destroy the cartels. And if they didn't agree to that, I would have to tell them that we have to look out for our American kids first and our future generations, so we need to do what we got to do. And so that's a reasonable plan. We give them a lot of money. But I got to tell you, Bill, I was at the DEA's largest ever international drug conference 2 months ago in Jamaica. 130 countries, the DEA administrator was showing her Faces of Fentanyl exhibit and all these dead kids. And guess what country did not show up? Mexico. So the number one country that we need didn't show up. So they kick sand in our face. They don't really care. When you peel back the onion you'll learn that the recent study revealed that the fifth largest business in Mexico is the criminal cartels.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no surprise they don't want to shut down their cash cow, right? There's so much corruption at the highest levels of the Mexican government. I mean, the former FBI equivalent was convicted on all charges, and he's in jail in the United States because he helped Chapo Guzman and the cartels run cocaine for many years. But the point is that, yes, we have to decimate their production capabilities and their infrastructure. The analogy that I use all the time from one of the families from Long Island, Lost Voices of Fentanyl, he said, if your water was leaking from your ceiling and the pipe exploded, the first thing you must do is shut down the main valve, right?
Right.
You can't sit there and let your house continue to get flooded. It will ruin everything. Well, guess what? Right now the cartels have created a tsunami of fentanyl deaths in the country, so we have to shut them down now. We can't keep procrastinating. We can't keep waiting. We can't keep letting soft on crime and corrupt officials in Mexico save our kids' lives. We have to stand up for the kids.
Well, this is the other thing, too. The phrase cartel, it really bothers me because these guys, in my opinion, they're no different than Hamas, all right? You see them execute people, behead people. We'll go down to Mexico on vacation, and we'll hear the stories of the guys down in Cabo San Lucas who were hung off the bridge after there was a fight amongst the cartels and the leaderships that they wanted to move in there. And they said, nope, you're not going to do that because, this is a revenue-generating area for us. So they wash their money, they buy hotels, and they keep that area pretty much clean and pristine in comparison to the border areas and the rest of Mexico where, these organized crime families are going after each other. And we brought down to a degree organized crime in the United States. Why isn't there a concerted effort amongst the Biden administration to designate these groups as terrorists? Because that's
right.
what they are.
Right. So they started out many years ago as drug cartels, and you're correct. They evolved into a transnational criminal network, organized crime. But now they're narco-terrorists, they're terrorists. You could call them anything. But the main thing is they have to be punished for all the devastation in America. They have to receive the appropriate, punishment because we can't let them unaccountable for what they've done. As you know, this current administration is very soft on crime. Nobody's being held accountable. That's why these thugs are breaking into, very exclusive shopping stores and they're stealing all this stuff and they're getting away with it. That's why people are being released on the street. That's why we're letting in all these illegals to come into our country. I mean, like Tom Homan says, the CEO of Border 911, it's now legal to be illegally here in America.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, 90% of these asylum claims are all fraudulent. They have no merit to them, but the public doesn't even hear that. They just say, oh, these poor people, we got to have a big heart. Look, we all have hearts for people that are trying to feed their kids and eat. Plus, we also have hearts for, we love immigration, but legal immigration is the only way to go. But the bottom line is Mexico is disastrous right now. They're not doing their job. They're not helping America, so America has to do it by themselves if needed. We have to be a little more aggressive. In this administration, we're not even doing the basic stuff. Why wasn't there a White House summit to declare a public security, national security, public safety emergency? Why haven't we used professional athletes, celebrities, role models, influencers to push out campaigns on the TikToks and the Snapchats and social media sites? Because that's where the kids are all day. They're not watching news. They're not listening to podcasts or radio. They're watching video reels all day. Why can't we get LeBron James and some of these professional athletes to start doing some short video reels to educate the kids that they will die if they take a pill from somebody else?
Yep.
That's just a fact.
Well, Derek, the other thing, too, that bothers me is that we're, as American citizens, we're all in this together. But it's really upsetting to me and quite frankly disheartening because it seems to be the same families over and over and over again that dedicate themselves to the service of this country. And I know that you lost your brother in Afghanistan. You served almost 3 decades. You get brought up in an appreciation for this country, and it seems what has happened and the deterioration over the last, let's call it 4 or 5 years of every police organization, military, I mean, it's just been dragged down. And the people that are there doing this, putting their life on the line, you can only ask them to do so much, and before they just say, I'm unappreciated. It's like the dog that constantly gets kicked by its master. Eventually it runs away from home. And we're seeing this, this mass exodus out of not only, the cops, but we're seeing it across any type of law enforcement across the board. How do we bring that to a stop, and how do we right the ship?
Right. I mean, you're making a great point. We talk about, police suicides and Border Patrol suicides, and because they're not doing the job that they signed on to. Like Border Patrol right now, they didn't sign on to be babysitters and administrative paperwork pushes. They came on to keep Americans safe. They're not allowed to do their job, and then they see their bosses at the highest level lying to the public. Local police, politicians want to defund the police in many states, right? And then you see what happens. They all run around with bodyguards. They have security walls at their houses. They're hypocritical. And the police basically are losing resources left and right. They're going to retire. They're getting away from it because they know if they make one honest mistake on the job, because they're trying to protect themselves or someone else, they'll go to jail. They'll get indicted. They'll be on TV. The social media sites will destroy their family, their kids. So they don't want to be bothered. They had enough. And that's really sad for me to see this, because when we don't have the police out there keeping us safe, then the whole country is vulnerable. Just like without border security, we have no national security. And that's the direction we're going in. And by the way, one last thing on that note, and it just came out this week, our social media sites are now going to have a default with encryption on all the messaging, which means law enforcement, even pursuant to court orders and a federal judge, will not be able to get the content. That's what we call going dark. So the gap between good and evil is growing daily. That means every family is vulnerable. And as a saying I've had for a couple of years now, which I pushed out, we're not talking about a red or a blue issue. We're talking about a red, white, and blue issue. All Americans should care. All Americans should be pissed off. All Americans should unite. I don't understand people sitting on the sidelines not willing to speak out against this. Is outrageous.
Neither do I. And Derek, we got to wrap this up, but quickly, how do people get a hold of you, and what's the easiest way to join in with you and Homan on AmericanProject.com?
Border911.com is the website. That's where we're at. That's where we put out the statistics. I have my Twitter, Derek Maltz _senior. I have a national security public safety Facebook site. We're pushing out stuff on social media every day. Anything we can push out, but we also publish statistics on the Border911.com site.
Perfect.
So, obviously, I appreciate that. So, all the best. Merry Christmas.
Merry
Bill,
Christmas to you, Derek, and your family, and thank you to your family for what you've done. Folks, that wraps up this week's edition of Will the People. Will be back next week.